At the beginning of the movie, we see Ellie Turner dancing in her bedroom. Ellie is a young woman with dreams of becoming a fashion designer. She shares a home with her grandmother Peggy and has been grieving the loss of her mother, who occasionally appears to her in reflections. Peggy shares with Ellie a letter she received, informing her that Ellie has been accepted into a fashion school in London. While Ellie is thrilled by the news, Peggy cautions her about the presence of unsavory individuals in the area where she will be studying. Ellie travels to London by train and is dropped off at her accommodation by a cab driver, who makes unsettling remarks to her. In response, Ellie decides to disembark at a shop and waits until the driver leaves before continuing on foot to her destination. Upon arrival, she meets her roommate Jocasta. Ellie shares with her roommates that her mother struggled with mental illness and ultimately took her own life. She joins her colleagues for a night out in the city. As Ellie is in the bathroom, she overhears Jocasta discussing about her with the other girls. Out of frustration, she leaves the restaurant to return to her room. On the way, she sees an older man, who looks at her and smiles. Later, Jocasta returns to the room with a guy. Although Ellie is trying to sleep, due to the noise, she leaves the room. A party is going on in the dorm. A student named John tries to be friendly with her, but Ellie puts on her headphones and attempts to rest. The next morning, Ellie wakes up late and runs to the classroom to be on time. Ellie wants to find a peaceful place to live alone. She discovers a room in a house owned by Ms. Collins, who lets her stay there. Ms. Collins gives her some rules to follow. Ellie likes the place and rests for the night, covering herself completely. Upon rising from bed, Ellie suddenly finds herself transported back to the 1960s. Inside Café de Paris, she catches sight of her own reflection as Sandie, a young aspiring singer. Ellie seems to be observing everything as Sandie navigates through unwanted attention from a rude patron, who suggests that she speak to Jack about becoming a singer. After meeting Jack, Sandie is smitten with him, but their departure is interrupted by the patron's crude remarks. Jack punches the patron in the face and runs away with Sandie, culminating in a kiss inside a phone booth, which is reflected as happening to Ellie as well. As Ellie continues to move about, she eventually finds Sandie lying in her bed. But upon attempting to touch her, Ellie awakens back in the present day. Ellie finds creative inspiration at school by observing Sandie's fashion style. However, Jocasta notices a mark on Ellie's neck caused by Jack's romantic gestures toward her Sandie. That night, Ellie goes to bed with the hope of being transported back to the 1960s. Her wish is granted, and she witnesses Sandie's encounter with Jack, who brings her to perform at a different venue, the Rialto, where she sings, downtown. The men present at the venue recognize Sandie's vocal talent and are impressed by her performance. Ellie decides to change her hair color to blonde, mirroring Sandie's hairstyle. She also works hard on her dress design, which receives positive feedback from her teacher, while Jocasta ridicules her out of spite. Ellie spots the venue where she had previously seen Sandie perform, which looks quite different in the present day. She then heads to a pub to inquire about job opportunities. While returning to her room, the old man from the first night follows her, recognizing her by her hair color but assures her that he is not trying to hook her. Ellie travels back to the 1960s and visits the Rialto, but discovers that Sandie is now performing as part of a group of provocatively dressed female dancers, accompanying a woman who appears to be a marionette. While following Sandie, Ellie witnesses Jack's abusive behavior, as he insists that she must please certain men if she wants to succeed in the music industry. In the bedroom, a lecherous man approaches Sandie with his pants down, causing Ellie to scream at him to stop touching her. Although the man seems to hear her, Ellie wakes up from the dream. The traumatic experience leads Ellie to tear apart the pink dress design that she had initially created in class. Ellie manages to balance both work and school responsibilities. During her next trip to the 1960s, Ellie witnesses Sandie becoming more disillusioned and miserable as Jack coerces her into prostitution, forcing her to satisfy a series of vile men while struggling with drug and alcohol addiction. Sandie uses various aliases such as Alex, Lexi, or Anna. Only one man treats her with kindness and respect. Ellie eventually breaks the glass and reaches out to Sandie, but wakes up from her dream. Upon noticing Ellie's ill appearance, John invites her to a Halloween party. Together, they attend the party. Jocasta and her friends offer them drinks, and they start dancing. However, in the middle of the party, Ellie experiences horrifying hallucinations of the men who exploited Sandie and Sandie herself dancing alone. John becomes concerned about Ellie's condition and takes her home. They start kissing and intend to have sex in her room, but Ellie sees a reflection of Jack attacking Sandie in the ceiling mirror and screams at him to stop. She then witnesses Jack murdering Sandie. Ms. Collins hears the commotion and orders John to leave since male visitors are prohibited. She simply instructs Ellie to go to bed. The following day, Ellie apologizes to Ms. Collins for the previous night's incident and asks if anyone has died in her room before, but Ms. Collins avoids giving a clear answer. Later, Ellie goes to the library to research murders that occurred in the 60s, but she begins to hallucinate ghostly men following her around. This nearly leads her to harm Jocasta with a pair of scissors, but John intervenes and explains the situation to Jocasta. Ellie, panicked, runs out of the library and heads to the police station to report the murder. However, the detectives recognize that Ellie has little evidence to support her claim, even though she now believes that the old man she saw is actually Jack and that he got away with killing Sandie. Ellie arrives late for work and discovers that the elderly man is waiting for her. She attempts to record his confession using her phone, but when she mentions Sandie, the man reveals that Alex was responsible for her death, and that Sandie had brought it upon herself. Ellie chases after him, but he is hit by a car and dies. Her boss tells someone to call for an ambulance, and says that the man is a former police officer named Lindsay. Ellie realizes that he is not Jack but the kind gentleman who had treated her with respect and did not take advantage of her. Ellie is on the phone with her grandmother, saying that she wants to return home as soon as possible. John offers to drive her home that very evening. But before leaving, Ellie wants to collect her luggage from Mrs. Collins' house. Ellie tells Mrs. Collins that she wants to go home. Ms. Collins hands her a cup of tea. Ellie notices a letter addressed to Ms. Collins revealing her true name to be Alexandra, which is what Sandie told Jack her name was short for. Ellie learns that someone did die in her room. It was Sandie. She let her life as Sandie die when she stabbed Jack to death. After enduring years of abuse from him and seeking revenge on all the men who abused her by murdering them. Ms. Collins then reveals that she poisoned Ellie's tea and intends to make it look like a suicide. When John arrives looking for Ellie, Ms. Collins stabs him while Ellie tries to escape upstairs. She sees the younger Sandie attacking her and a fire starts downstairs, quickly spreading throughout the house. Ellie barricades herself in her room. The spirits of Sandie's victims break through the walls and floors, begging Ellie to kill Ms. Collins. When she finally breaks in, Ms. Collins catches a glimpse of herself in the mirror, appearing as Sandie, and realizes that she has become just as much of a monster as the men who have caused her harm. She tries to kill herself, but Ellie tries to help Ms. Collins, who chooses to stay and die in the fire while letting Ellie go. Ellie gets John out of the house as medics arrive. Sometime later, Ellie showcases her work in a fashion show. His grandmother and John attend to support her, along with the rest of the audience. Her teacher praises her, and the other girls congratulate her, except for Jocasta, who remains hostile. Ellie sees her mother's reflection smiling at her again. While Peggy and John approach to congratulate her, she notices Sandie's reflection waving at her in the mirror.